Welcome to the Basic Bee podcast, a show for the wannabe SEO savvy service providers among us, for the coaches and consultants who dream of becoming known for their storytelling skills, not to mention the solopreneurs who straight up need to master all things social proof to increase sales. After a little reluctantly fully committing to this online world of business, I quickly realized I needed to get people to come to me. I needed to tell them I was here and how I could support them. I dove headfirst into social proof, which led me to SEO, which led me to storytelling. And now it gives me great joy to share what I've learned with other business owners so they skip the hard stuff and ease straight into sales. This podcast gives you expert insights, actionable takeaways, and casual convos with some of the online world's best and brightest experts and strategists. I think that's enough of an intro, so here we go. Welcome back to the Basic Bee podcast. I am so excited to have you here, and I really just want you to know I'm so grateful that you are here, whether you're tuning in on YouTube or listening to any of the podcast players. It means a lot, and you're in for a treat today. Of course, I think I say that every single time I record with a guest. I am going to be talking with Stephanie O'Keefe, and we're going to be talking about writing and designing case study web pages. I am so stoked about this topic because Stephanie and I actually collaborated on a real live case study page. So we're going to talk through that. And then, of course, I've got questions. So quick intro before I bring Stephanie on. Steph is a web designer and SEO strategist, and she's the owner of Southern Creative. Southern Creative is a digital marketing company dedicated to helping service-based brands gain more visibility online through strategic WordPress websites and SEO. And fun fact is that Steph and I were actually in Raleigh at the same time, but we didn't know until I moved out of the state. So now we get to spend lots of time on Zoom. Hi, Steph.
Hi, Brittany. Thank you so much for having me today.
Oh my gosh, thanks for joining me. I have been eagerly awaiting chatting about this topic. I know I'm like frequently messaging you like, can we talk about this? You want to come over here and talk about that? So thanks for joining me.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to dive into this and hang out with all of your people today.
Yeah, of course. All right. So I'm going to hit you with the heavy hitting question before we dive into like the fun topic. So the question is, which do you believe is the most important for sales? SEO, storytelling, or social proof?
Oh my goodness. That is a tough question. The most important for sales. Can I say all of the above?
Yes.
Like all of the above. All of them come so much hand in hand with building that know, like, and trust. That's so important for brands, especially brands living online in the virtual space that don't have like a place for you to walk into. And even if you do have a place that someone can walk into, like that digital storefront's typically that first stop of the process, and having all of those aspects brought in is huge. So D, all of the above.
I love it. And I think I've said this before on the podcast, but the fact that all three combine perfectly, so beautifully, it happens in case studies so seamlessly, especially the way that I write them and the way that I know you believe in them as well. And that's one thing that I thought was really cool when I was introduced to you, is that we have this really, similar, if not overlapping belief that SEO and copywriting, it's a need to have. It's not like a nice to have anymore.
Yes. Yeah. No, you need it all to be working together so that it's working for you, and having that social proof and that connection is so important to be brought into that strategic level. And it's just like next level. It's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. I'm curious. I don't think I've ever asked you this before, but before you and I collaborated, and I'll share the story in a second, but before you and I collaborated on Leah's case study, had you ever designed another case study webpage?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, I have not. Previously, the most in-depth had been more in the blog style of a case study, kind of highlighting the projects or success that client had helped somebody else to get, but never on a full page that it's built out as in-depth and well-written as the one that we did for Leah.
Translation as long as one that I wrote. And that is something that I hear a lot, is they're surprised that they're so long. Here's something that I often say to clients, and I wonder if you feel the same way. Do you feel like they're kind of similar, case study pages, to sales pages?
Yes, I absolutely do. Especially the formula and the flow that you take your clients through with really pulling out the story and the success and helping to walk through what that looked like, 100%. It's a similar design process from my side of helping to visually tell and flow through the words in the same way that we would do on a sales page design.
Oh, that's so good to hear. Because like I said, I definitely talk about that. And we are going to get into your part of the process. We're going to break down like the writing of the case study and the case study design process. So, all right, before I keep throwing questions at you, you and I met by way of Leah Bryant, who produces this podcast. Shout out to Leah for making us sound good all the time. Thank you, friend. But we met through Leah, and I can't remember exactly when we met or how we met, but I think I was probably looking for someone to connect somebody else with for web page design. Usually that's what happens. And then I meet all these incredible designers and pull them in for other projects, which is great. Mm-hmm. But you ended up taking the case study copywriting that I wrote for Leah about her client, Daryl, and you turned it into this gorgeous page. And I was telling you before we hit record, I think every single person who's come in the door since then, whenever someone is like, do you have any examples? I'm always like, Leah's, like, look at Leah's and Daryl, like, Steph did an incredible job. And then there's one other one that I will reference as well. But like, this is one of my favorites that I've ever seen designed. And I'm just like so grateful that we were able to collaborate on that, because I met you. I like instantly, we were like friends and I never wanted you to go away. But then I was like so stoked to be able to collaborate on this. And I guess like, was there anything, if you even remember it at this point, was there anything that stood out about having that Google Doc and being able to take it into like the design process that was good?
First of all, thank you like for your kind words. That means the absolute world to me. I'm so glad that you've been able to use this example for your clients to see like the power of a case study. I think it's a wonderful example. Leah did a standout job with bringing all of Daryl's testimonial to life. And I just love how it's all kind of working together. But yeah, no, thank you so much. To answer your question, I think how just you laid out the Google Doc in a way that made it seamless. Like you can tell, even though you weren't designing it on like the aesthetic side, you were designing the flow, and the flow of a website page is so important. And the flow of how it was written was so well thought out. And that was very evident. But that's so important. And half the battle with pulling copy and content into a web design page is making sure that we're helping to take the customer through a journey, that you took them through the journey, through the words. And then I was able to merge bringing them through the journey of the visual, and it just pulled together very strategically. And so, yeah, no, you did a very great job at like pulling it out. And even to a non-designer, I feel like how you had it pulled out in the Google Doc can help someone kind of see how they could potentially have the sections laid out on their page.
That's awesome. I really like hearing that, because that is definitely a goal of mine where I'm like, please, like if I can just organize things and have it be really easy and seamless to understand, to follow, not only just from the word and the story perspective, but also from like the actual organization of the document. I'm really happy to hear that that was helpful. So thank you. I feel like I'm doing something right, which is always very nice. So you haven't designed any other case study pages, really. Have you ever written any? Because I know in-house, we should clarify, you at Southern Creative, you do SEO and strategy and copywriting and design and all of that, right?
Yeah, we do. But no, we have not. We don't specialize in writing case studies. We have helped with more of like that blog style. We do offer ongoing like blogging support. And so pulling in some of the experiences of clients and their projects, but never a full-blown case study page.
Cool. I like hearing that you do bring that in with blogs, especially too. I guess I'll go ahead and ask this to you now, because I do get this question a lot from, it might be in a DM, it might be through a client or a student going through my program, where people are like, okay, do I need to have a case study as a blog, or do I need to have it as its standalone web page? And I want to hear your thoughts, because my thoughts may overlap and they may be different.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. I don't know if there's 100% like the right answer. Like if you do it this way, it's the right way, or this way, it's the wrong way. There's not black and white. Typically, how I would recommend it, depending on where the brand and the company currently is and like the resources that you have and the time to allocate to designing out a full page, starting in a blog post is going to be the quickest way to kind of get it out there and working for them. And then you can always convert that blog post over to its own case study page and even kind of keep that blog post, maybe summarize more, and then lead people from that blog post to the full case study page once that is up on your website, and kind of help them kind of move through that journey from a blog post to that page. And then, of course, ultimately to reaching out to potentially work with you if that's what you're hoping clients kind of move towards. But obviously online is the best way for people to learn about it. And so just kind of getting it out there.
Yeah, for sure. That's how I feel. I'm like, whatever is going to actually get you to share the case study on your website, which is a key point that you brought out, because yes, I talk about repurposing case studies in email sequences or launch sequences or over on social media for sure. But I want you to be driving that traffic back to your website, because that's where the SEO juice is really going to matter. That's where you rack up the points. I like hearing that. Cool. So the answer kind of is do whatever is going to be easiest for you to get it out there, whether that looks like a blog, whether that looks like I've had one client talk about creating almost like a secondary blog section where it was like just dedicated to case studies.
Yeah. And that's a great way to do it too, depending on what platform you have your website on. There are different ways where you could have a different template that's pulling from like your blog post section of your website that's designed with case studies in mind and has a very specific different look than maybe what your typical blog post page would look like. And that's a great way to do it as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. So you have options. I love that. I love whenever there's options. When you think of a case study, now that you've at least seen Leah and Daryl's, do you feel like there are certain things that all case study pages need from, and that could be from a design perspective only, or I know you've got all three, the SEO, the design, and the copy, so. What if you had an easy way to bust objections you commonly hear? Well, case studies can be that thing for you. Recently, my case study client, Brenna, shared she had her biggest launch ever, and she largely credits case studies for that launch success. Each time she heard an objection from a potential student, she was able to simply point them to the case study. She let her students do the talking and the objection busting. I mean, what could be easier than that? Maybe hiring me for a done-for-you case study is an option that's just not on the table right now. Cool. You might be interested in my case study training program. It's specifically designed for solopreneurs, service providers who are wearing all the hats and just need to know what to do and exactly how to do it, so they have a case study on their site they can be proud of and point people to, just like Brenna did. Doors open April 22nd, and we officially kick things off on April 29th. All the info is below.
Yeah. I think from a design perspective, a must-have is the person's face, I would say. Like, there's unfortunately in the time that we live, it's amazing with all the technology and all of the resources, but at the same time, there's websites that just don't feel authentic sometimes. And bringing in a real person that people can connect with helps to build that authenticity. It builds that trust and that alignment. So having a picture or like a video of somebody talking through their experience working is huge. Having those layers into the design, I would say, is a huge must have.
For sure. I could not agree more. And I usually harp on that, especially with about pages. I'm like, please just have your face on there. And I really harped on that even as a massage therapist. When I was just a massage therapist, I was like, I want someone to know that it's me when they're coming in the door for the first time and be like, oh, you're the person I'm going to be going to say, okay, cool. And it's not, I always like to make the point that it's not about judging anybody or putting it out there for any other reason other than just to make someone feel more comfortable with the situation. So, I mean, that's what you're doing. You're really just, it's a connection point.
Yes, it's a connection point, a place where they're not obviously seeing that person face to face, but they can start to build that trust and know that, okay, this Daryl, for going back to like Leah's page,
Yeah.
like Daryl had a fabulous experience. Like I am in a similar place to where he started. Like I want to reach out to Leah's team. And so like having that connection with your case study client, like that's a huge layer to it.
For sure. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's a great tip from the design perspective. Is there anything from the SEO
Mhm.
perspective that you feel like is really important in a case study?
Yeah. So I'll be completely honest with I haven't written enough case study content. I don't do on my fabulous team. I'm not the writer behind the
Uh-huh.
scene. I do the SEO research side of things. And then my amazing copywriters take it and whisk it away into crafting wonderful words that I can bring into the design. So from the SEO side, obviously kind of going into the keyword research and what it is at the service and the transformation, that's another must have. But as far as writing it, I would defer to you. Like what would you say are the must haves from that side?
Yeah, I mean, kind of just like piggybacking on the keyword research, one point of clarification that comes up a fair amount, I would say, with my clients is, they want to use their membership name or they want to use their program name.
Yeah.
And I have to gently break their heart and say, not everyone's going to be looking for that, but they are going to be looking for a solution to their problem. So it's the problem that
Mhm.
they're having, or they're
Yeah.
going to be looking so that they can achieve a certain result. What are the results
Mhm.
that your people are getting?
Yeah.
And especially when you have that one person that's being featured in the case study, it's like, what was their problem or what were their top three problems? What was their result or the top three results? And then
Yeah.
from there, you can do keyword research based on that. So sadly, if you're listening, people are likely, unless you're like Amy Porterfield, people are likely not Googling like your program name, but they are definitely looking for whatever stuck point, like whatever brick wall they're running up against or whatever that desire is that they have.
Yes. So
Yeah,
true. This question, like answering this question
exactly.
in the form of content is huge.
It is. And I mean, case studies, whether you have it as a blog page or a standalone web page, it is content and you are putting that out there and there is a longevity to it, just like
Mhm.
with blogs. So, okay, so let's talk through the process. So I'll kind of share what it's like from the case study copywriting perspective, like that part of the process, and then I'll hand it over to you and we can talk through the design part. So this is
Okay.
essentially what Leah experienced, and she will be coming on the podcast soon. So I'll be like, can you just verify this is accurate? Do you feel like we did a good job? Um, so, at least in my world, case studies are based on SEO, story, and of course, they are their own piece of social proof, but they also pull in testimonials, which are additional pieces of social proof. So, my flow when I am writing a case study is that it starts with an interview. That could be an interview that my client has done. Maybe it's a podcast interview, a YouTube video that's live, or a Facebook Live, or a hidden video interview that was done over Zoom that now lives in their Google Drive. So it always starts with an interview. Second option for an interview is that I actually really love interviewing. Don't know if anyone's noticed that. Me over here with my podcast, but I love interviewing. So that is also a service that I offer to my clients if they're like, I don't have time or I don't want to, or it would just be better if you could do it. So it starts with an interview. I watch and or listen to it and create a story arc, and I'm pulling quotes as I'm listening to that interview. Create the story arc. I give that to my client so they can approve it because I got myself into trouble one time when I didn't do that, and I've never not done that since then. Oh yeah, it was like comical, but it was a good lesson.
Lessons are learned the hardest way sometimes.
Now I can laugh at it. At the time I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
And then as my client is looking at the story arc and approving it, I'm doing the keyword research and creating the SEO strategy for the case study. I get the approval on the story arc and then I write. It goes to my copy editor, aka my boyfriend, who has this, thankfully, he has this like editing skill set. So I put it to use pretty frequently, which I really appreciate because it helps just have another set of eyes to look over that. I send it off to my client. If there are any modifications to be made, I go ahead and do that. And then it's done. The project is done. My client gets the Google Doc. They actually get 3 Google Docs. So they get the case study copywriting, which is what you definitely saw, which had all the words and it had like the H1,
Mhm.
H2, places for buttons, things like that. And then they get the SEO strategy sheet, which is separate. And I walk them through how to use that. There's a video And then they get a marketing map. So that has all of those pulled quotes. It has 3 specific quotes and a few specific ways that they can use things. And I like to lean into either their astrology or their human design to make it really like personalized so
Yeah.
they can feel like, oh, this is how I can use this case study in my world. So at that point, I don't know what happens to it usually. I do check in with my clients. I kind of have a 50-50 split right now for who has actually put the case study live on their website and who hasn't. I've had one client who she hasn't done a website redesign just yet. I think she has 3 case studies right now that are just living in like pretty Google Docs. So that's like as far as I've gone in designing these things. So they look presentable.
Yeah.
But at that point, like it goes off to someone like Steph. And then what happens?
That's such a good question. I know I can only speak to like our process. I'm sure it looks different depending on the team and who's kind of working through it, but I can speak for like what our process looks like. And honestly, it's a very similar process. And maybe that's why we like jive so well for me because it's a similar process. So we get the wonderful words. So depending on if our team is writing or we're bringing the copywriting in from another fabulous copywriter like yourself, we get the words. And then typically, if we didn't write the words, we usually have to pause and go back to the SEO research phase because most commonly that's not brought in until after. We actually see it brought in usually after the design, which is not a process that we recommend. We always recommend doing that before the words are written, similar like what you do, Brittany. And
Yes.
so having it all brought over, ready to go, like Leah's was fabulous. So like having all of the words ready to go. And so from there we designed. So for a sales page, for a case study page, we start in a design platform outside of the website builder so that we can make sure that we are bringing all of the words in. I bring them all over. I make the beautiful Google Doc that you have created, and I just like throw all of the words onto a blank long page so it looks like a Google Doc inside of my design platform. And then it just gets, it's like one of those moments like where you're cleaning your closet or a cabinet and you just like get everything out and you have all of your shoes open, you have your clothes on the ground and it's a mess. So that's like what it looks like on my design side. It's a mess until it comes together. And so I test out a few different kind of flows in the design. Sometimes if we get stuck on a certain section, which happens with like how it's flowing, I will just like leave it in the main, how it is like just written in like text. And then I'll leave it there and then kind of get into the design flow lower on the page. It just kind of depends on where the process is, how it's all kind of pulling together with the images brought in from like the client.
Mm-hmm.
So it gets messy in the design phase and we all get it buttoned up. And I have a similar feedback process. I send it to my clients, the initial kind of direction similar to you. I had a situation where I got too deep in the design process and it was not in the direction, which happens, of the vision. And, you know, starting a full page over is very different from starting half of the page over. So we do kind of a section that gets the all encompassing visual direction of that page done, send that over for feedback, make any changes to the direction, and then we build out the rest of the page in the design. And then from there, we make sure all of the photos are optimized for SEO, all of the keywords and all of that are kind of put in the image title.
Mm-hmm.
And then I bring it over. I'm a WordPress designer and developer. So we bring it over into WordPress from there and build it out and develop it and, you know, button up SEO on the back end of it. And it's ready for launch, kind of in a nutshell.
I love that. Is there like a time frame that it typically falls into to design, whether it's like a sales page or a case study page or anything like that?
Yeah, so it just kind of depends. It's usually within like our 1 day design intensive, especially if it's a client who we have worked with in the past where we kind of already know the visual direction.
Mm-hmm.
If it's somebody who is needing support on like the visual direction side, that timeline may be longer depending on what that looks like and what their foundation of the website looks like as well. So
Yeah,
there's definitely a lot of layers that come into it.
for sure. That makes total sense. Okay, so this was like the part two of what I wanted to ask a while ago, which is in general, just like with any kind of copywriter coming to you with case study copy. Of course, you know the experience of working with me, and you did make note of like the SEO being a helpful thing to actually be given. But is there anything else that copywriters could be doing to make a web designer's job easier?
I think having it well written out in kind of as the copywriters are writing, there's obviously there's purpose to what you're writing and having those sections denoted of like, I kind of see this as like a headline
Hmm.
or like this could be a great H2. This could be a great body. This is the testimonial. Like kind of having those kind of thoughts on the page or like as comments is great. So like as we're bringing it into the design and development, we can kind of get a little bit more in your head as far as like how it's written strategically to make sure that we're able to bring it in a way that visually pulls that same flow out. That's helpful. And then I of course loved the SEO. I think you even give your clients like what to name the images with the
Yeah.
image itself,
Yeah.
which is not something that I see often. So that's
Oh,
awesome that you
cool.
go through that process as well.
Oh, that's really amazing. And I need to have my friend Emily Perkins come back on the podcast because she really helped me to understand even like how to do alt text for a photo of just like someone sitting at their computer versus doing alt text for a screenshot, for example. So more of like a testimonial. And that was game changer. And I know I've talked about it on some show that I've recorded, but I need to bring her back on to talk through that because that's also really helpful for me as a copywriter to know. And then it helps you as a designer. I didn't realize that not a lot of people like give the image titles.
No, yeah, no, not. It's a step that's often missed
Hmm.
in the process, which is why we focus heavily on that initial piece as well. Because through working with startup companies who don't have a website presence to like, multi-figure entrepreneurs who have a large presence online, that was one thing that was consistently missed in
Hmm.
all of the projects that I had noticed is that strategy behind the SEO and the intentional steps that need to take before it goes online and onto the website platform. So yeah, it's awesome that you do that.
Sweet. I like knowing that. But also anyone else listening who's a copywriter, like nudge, nudge, hint, hint. On that note, anyone listening, if you need a checklist or some kind of document to help you figure out what those pieces are, and Stephanie, we could talk through like if there's anything else I need to add to it, but I have the SEO basics checklist, and that is what I then call for my clients the SEO strategy sheet. It's the same thing. It's got all the pieces, the target keywords, supportive keywords, image titles. There is a spot for alt text. I
Mhm.
give an example of that. But of course, at that point, I don't typically know which images are going to be pulled in because that's more of your territory. And I don't want to step on toes there, but I do want to give some options whether my client is going to take the copy and design the page or bring on a web designer like Steph. So I will make sure that that checklist is linked below. And you could take that and use it for your own projects to figure out what SEO pieces need to go in there. Every time I work with a client, especially if I know they are going to go hire a web designer, maybe they already have someone or maybe they're looking for someone, I do make a point of like, if anybody wants to talk to me, like I'm available. I tried to make this like easy to understand, but also like come find me. Do you ever find that you do end up being connected with copywriters to better understand their pages that they sent over?
Yes and no. So I definitely think the power of Google Docs are amazing to be able to like be all collaborating on one document in all different places is fabulous to be able to ask any of those clarification questions. I have jumped on like a Voxer kind of chat through before, which is helpful just to kind of chat through the direction or any questions or
Hmm.
clarification.
So is it fair to say you have talked with copywriters, but for the most part, you don't have to because it's like clear enough?
A lot of our projects recently have been in-house
Ah.
copy.
Hmm.
And so we're just constantly chatting and kind of going brainstorming and like sending messages back and forth on those particular clients. So I kind of already have a pretty good bead of the initial direction because we have a strategy call, the SEO research phase before
Hmm.
it goes over to copy. And so by that point, we kind of already have like a mutual rising tide of the direction of the copy and the design. So in that aspect, it's pretty seamless, but it's definitely if the copywriter is out of Southern Creative, definitely like having those conversations can help to build an idea. There's so many different personas and personalities behind copy. So to understand the client's persona and their brand voice, and then getting an idea of how that brand voice can be represented like, visually is also huge. And so all of that kind of comes back to how it was written, what the intention behind it was. So yeah, definitely collaborating is helpful.
Yeah, I didn't even think about the fact that, of course, you've got copywriters in-house, so you would know. You would have like a good pulse on your copywriters and what their thoughts are and how they're forming out the Google Docs and everything. Is there anything else that you want to point out or call attention to before we wrap up about case study copywriting or SEO or web page design in general?
I mean, there's so many things there. I think we could chat like literally all day about all of it. I think just to know that it's all a work in progress, like getting it out there and working for you is so crucial. Getting it online in a blog format, but then bringing it in like the design layers is super crucial. And then also one like major thing is making sure you submit that page to Google to be indexed. So that it can start being read and filed in that digital filing cabinet is huge. So like that's like the last step that I feel like a lot of people don't do is just making sure Google knows it's there.
I know, because someone will write something and they'll publish it. Like, let's just say it's a blog for the sake of simplicity, but you publish a blog. I used to think up until really last year that that was it and it was fine and it was on the internet. And turns out, no, there's a final step. And I can't remember if this interview is going to go live before or after, but I do have a recording about that, walking you through. So I'll make sure that that's linked below for anyone listening, so you have that tutorial to go listen to. But it is a critical last step. It's something I call out I have a how to blog with SEO email course, and I make sure that that's part of the steps in the process. But you don't know what you don't know.
You don't. It's so crucial. And it's usually like people will have this amazing content and you pull up their site index and they have like 2 pages index. They have 100 pages on their website. It's like that disconnect. So yeah, definitely a crucial step that is overlooked often.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's say anyone listening wants to connect with you. Where can they go do that?
Oh my goodness. So I'm over on Instagram at Southern Creative Co. or over at our website, southerncreativeco.com, if you're looking for like any web design tips, SEO tips, resources, WordPress, kind of best practices. We have all of that over on our blog, as well as a few resources that you can grab as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I know you mentioned your DIY like SEO audit, right?
Yeah, I have a DIY SEO audit. Sounds very similar maybe to your checklist, like a 1-page, on-page kind of checklist to help with the kind of on-page design and making sure that as you're designing the website page, you're still doing these SEO kind of best practices throughout the process. So yeah, that's another one of my services and resources out there as well.
Yeah, I'll make sure that's linked below, because that sounded like a really good companion for everything we were talking about today.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for joining me. This was really fun. It was a blast, and I'd been looking forward to having this conversation.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for bringing all of these like wonderful case studies to life.
That was really something, wasn't it? Let that really sink in and guide you toward being the answer to even more Googled questions. Thanks so much for joining me this episode. You are the reason this show exists and that it keeps growing. Thanks to all those follows and reviews. If you know someone who could benefit from what was shared, send it to them. We don't do shy around here. If you thought of clarifying or follow-up questions while listening, you know what to do. Say hi on Instagram. Check the show notes for all the things that were mentioned, and I'll talk to you soon, friend. Looking for an introvert-friendly way to sell, or even just want to stop feeling so salesy? I've got just the thing for you. Case studies. Yeah, I know. I talk about them all the time, but there's a good reason for it. Case studies are the ultimate marketing resource for introverts and service providers. There's no better way to show someone the exact experience they could have working with you. They get to see themselves reflected in the story they're reading. They start to feel more connected to you and your approach, and they see the results that are possible for them too. There's absolutely no salesy feelings anywhere near case studies. You can get my exact step-by-step process, all sorts of resources, checklists, templates, video trainings, live calls with me, and so much more inside my case study training program for solopreneurs. Doors open April 22nd, and we officially kick things off on April 29th. Click the link below for all the details.